Good evening, brothers and sisters.
Comrades and friends.
My name is Tondi Farley. I work with the Professional Staff Congress, or the PSC. I'm also here representing the PSU, which is our local staff union.
And I'm Ben Bath of the AFM Local 802, and we want to welcome you to tonight's Workers' Forum. Give it up. Co-hosted by 1199 SEIU. There you go. Communication Workers of America, they in the house? All right. Federal Unionist Network. There you go. All right. And the Left Labor Project.
So tonight's forum is entitled Fighting MAGA and Fighting Racism, Looking Towards 2026.
But first, we wanted to thank SEIU 1199 for making this space available. It is much appreciated. Second, tonight's topic is unfortunately extremely timely. I will not develop that since that's the role of our speakers and our discussion tonight. But before we get started, I'd just like to introduce the Left Labor Project itself. The Left Labor Project is made up of union activists and supporters of the labor movement in New York City. We include union officers, staffers, and rank and file, active and retired, and the as of yet unorganized, as well as students and young people. So all are welcome. We believe that the labor movement and its allies here and around the world comprise a central force which can win democracy, equality, peace, and a better life for all working people. We welcome all workers, both members of organizations, independents, and those who simply want to learn more about how to make change in the world. We believe that power concedes nothing without a demand, and that the oligarchs and monopoly capitalists won't give an inch unless challenged by a broad and organized, multiracial, and multigendered working class, which centers and puts first and foremost the need of the hyper-exploited sectors of the working class, those facing double, triple oppression, people of color, women, the undocumented, and the LGBT community. We therefore have four unifying principles. One, the Left Labor Project believes in socialism and democracy. All right. Two, we believe that the working class, together with communities of color and all oppressed peoples, is the only coalition with the power to achieve lasting social change. And third, as an organization, we do not interfere with the internal affairs of other organizations with which our individual participants are members. And four, and most popularly, our meetings are never longer than 2 hours and always end by 8 p.m.
Okay, so before we jump in, we'd like to welcome representatives from Starbucks Workers United. Great, yeah, we're gonna hear a little bit about their campaign. Come on up, go.
Thank you. All right. I'll put this right here real quick. Oh, nope, never mind. All right. Hi, thank you. My name is Melina Carasquillo. I am one of the 100 baristas currently on strike in the New York City region. There's currently about 2,500 baristas over 85 cities currently on strike supporting us. And if I would like to open with some facts. I just want to let you guys know that it is a fact that Starbucks is one of the most prolific ULP violators in modern history. Boo. And also I wanted to let you guys know this is a fact that Brian Nichols has made $96 million in last year in 4 months of take-home pay, which amounts to $6,666 is the average of take-home pay that baristas have. Please excuse me. A little nervous on public speaking here. Thank you. What I would like to say is that for Starbucks Workers United, the demands that we're currently asking for are currently that we need better take-home pay, better hours, and better staffing for all stores. All we ask of the everyday person is to please don't buy Starbucks during this period. And if you can, please come support us on our picket lines whenever you see fit. Currently, you have a flyer passed around stating that tomorrow is a big rally at the Empire State Building at 1 p.m. And we would love it to have all you guys support us during that time. And so thank you so much for having us, and I hope you have a good rest of your night.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker and our panelists. We're going to hear opening remarks from Dr. Alethia Jones, who is our keynote speaker. Dr. Alethia Jones will be followed by our three panelists, Nadine Williamson, Chris Stalls, and Hae-Lin Choi. Okay, so after we've heard from our panelists, we're going to open up the floor for discussion. We have some questions, and then we're going to throw it open to the audience. Please make sure you have little cards on your seats. Please make sure you write the questions down on those cards, and a volunteer will come and collect them from you at some point. So without further ado, let me introduce today's panelists and keynote speaker. So Dr. Alethia Jones joined SLU as Distinguished Lecturer in Labor Studies in January of 2023 and serves as Director of Civic Engagement and Leadership Development at the Murphy Institute. For 6 years, she directed the education and leadership development of 1199 SEIU United Healthcare Workers East, serving 400,000 members in 5 states and DC. She oversaw the Bread and Roses partnership with Harry Belafonte, developed programs with the 1199 League Training and Educational Fund, and coordinated with SEIU's national initiatives, such as the Rockwood Leadership Program. She co-authored an award-winning movement memoir with the co-founder of the Combahee River Collective, Barbara Smith, and served as co-associate director for the Murphy Institute from 2000 to 2001, and also served on the advisory board from 2012 to 2018. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so we're also going to hear from Nadine Williamson, who is a seasoned leader in labor organizing sector. She currently serves as the vice president at 1199, and senior executive. We have this from before. This is an older version. My apologies. So she plays a vital role in shaping policies that impact the workforce. Her leadership is characterized by a commitment to enhancing worker rights and promoting equitable healthcare access. Nadine is passionate about fostering collaboration and innovation within the labor movement. Great. We'll be hearing from Hae-Lin Choi, who serves as the Area Director for Politics, Legislation, and Mobilization for the Communications Workers of America, District 1. Prior to that, Hae-Lin oversaw CWA's global campaign to organize workers at T-Mobile and has been with the CWA since 2009. Originally from Germany, Hae-Lin got her start in the labor movement in the German Service Sector Union, Verdi, in 2001. She earned her PhD in political science from Free University in Berlin in 2009. Okay, and last but not least, Chris Doles is president of IFPTE Local 98, representing staff at the New York District and North Atlantic Division Office of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and co-executive director of the Federal Unionist Network. Thank you all.
All right, thank you so much for coming, and we hope that the program, you'll find it both informative and empowering. But since we're at 1199's house, so to speak, we'd like now to invite Nadine Williamson up to open up the program with some words of welcome, to be followed by the keynote speaker, Dr. Alethia Jones. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. What time is it? 6:38. Okay, we're supposed to start at 6. So welcome to the house of 1199. Welcome all of you. It is great to see a filled room. of labor leaders, of activists, of power people. It's really, really good to see y'all. So, want to let you know that if you came here to have small talk, this is probably not the place. Tonight, we plan to have deep, engaging, honest, and real conversation. Are y'all ready for that? Now, some of the topics may make you feel uncomfortable because we're all, we think alike. But there's some things that may be set up here that may make you feel uncomfortable. And sometimes when we feel uncomfortable is when we move. And so what we want to do here is we want to talk about the intersections of economic justice or the lack thereof, racism, and how it meets the labor movement. And if y'all know, labor has not always been a friend to people of color. If you don't know that, you're going to know that tonight. And so it is my hope that we will have real conversation not just about how the labor movement looks today, but also conversation about how the labor movement looked for my parents, for my grandparents, and honestly, we're not that far off if y'all have heard stories. And so tonight, I want to welcome you, and I want to welcome back Dr. Alethia. That's how we know her. She has been family to 1199 and always will be family. And I'm looking forward to her schooling us tonight on the really difficult conversation. And again, y'all, we are not here to have small talk. We are here to have that uncomfortable conversation. I'm going to be clear. There's a lot of white folks in the room, right? And so what we want to talk about is how white folks can be allies, but also why we haven't seen people of color show up in certain movements with immigration, right? We want to talk about that. So when I say we may get uncomfortable, we may get uncomfortable. And so I hope that as we move forward tonight, that we will leave this room empowered and stronger so we can make things happen. Let's do it. All right.
All right. Thank you, Nadine. Goodness. It is good to see everyone, and it is good to be home. 1199 holds a very, very special place in my heart and my soul. It's good to see so many familiar faces. If I could do it my way, all of you would be up here, all the speakers will be up here. I will try to be brief. It's only 20 minutes that I have before we open it up to everyone else. So we won't get to every possible thing, but I'd like to stir the waters a little bit, if I could. So thank you to the Starbucks workers who are leading the way in something truly extraordinary, led by a lot of our LGBTQIA family and friends who are well represented there in the leadership and among Starbucks workers. I want to thank the Left Labor Project, Tandy and Ben, Larry and the team. Tandy also works with PSC, which is my current union, Professional Staff Congress at CUNY. So I know how many people believe that fighting racism is essential to fighting MAGA. Like you already believe that. You're in the room. All right. Almost every single hand is up. So I don't have to persuade you on that matter. So I'm going to start off a bit contrarian. First by saying this is not a MAGA problem, right? MAGA is the convenient label of the moment for beliefs and dynamics that can be traced to the founding of this country. And in colonialist projects all over the world. Some say racism is a stain on America, an oopsie that perhaps can be removed with some Tide stain remover. But what if racism is actually part of the fabric, right? And it can't be washed out in quite that way. There are two scholars who wrote a book in the early 70s where they studied all the major social reform movements of the 19th and early 20th century. And they found that at crucial points, every single movement, whether it was the abolitionists, the progressives, the women suffragists, the socialists, and organized labor, every single one of those movements at a crucial point sold out Black people. Right? They made some kind of deal which cut out Black people so they could get the thing that they wanted. Like the women's movement wanted the vote. So, and I'm sure there are scholars who arrive at similar conclusions about modern and contemporary movements, right? Those dynamics are very much in play, and I would offer that we can see it alive and well today, especially sort of post the Harris loss. There's a lot of finger pointing that is going on. I'm going to take the second premise from the title and argue that it's more than racism, right? It's racism plus. So we want to address racism, but we need to also address like all the isms, right? Racism takes many forms. Anti-Black racism, yes, but there's also anti-Asian racism. There's Islamophobia. Now we're getting into Somaliphobia. We also have to address sexism, because to address racism without sexism, what are we doing? You know, transphobia, homophobia, and we also have a Christian nationalism problem, which we didn't quite have before, right? That those countries should be ruled through Christian values. It's not freedom of religion for everyone. It's a primacy of Christianity that should be imposed upon all of us. And so I would say any culture or system that justifies supremacist thinking is really what we're fighting. And racism can become a stand-in for all of those isms. And it will not be a surprise, given that opening, that I don't think we have a 2026 problem. We have a forever problem. Something an organizer recently described as an infinite game. And in an infinite game, right, you're always playing, and every generation gets to fight its fight and seek to address it. So we need to survive the losses, and we also need to survive the wins, right? Mamdani's win is extraordinary, and that belongs to all of us and to all of you. Give yourselves a round of applause. But the fights to protect that win and have it mean something have already begun, right? The dirty, underhanded tricks and the bare-knuckled political fights designed to obstruct, obscure, distort, defer, distract, right? A win isn't automatically a win. We also have to work for it to be meaningful. So we're going to talk about some problems tonight, but I want to say explicitly that America is not only its problems. There are many wonderful things about us as a people and a country. And the isms make us less than who we are, right? They don't make us great. James Baldwin said that he criticized America because he loves America. And I want to bring that deep love into this room because it makes our presence here possible. Years ago, when I was at 1199 and co-hosting and co-moderating a leadership event attended by officers, many of whom had no less than 20 years and often more than 30 years of dedicated service to this institution. We asked, as part of the opening getting to know you questions, something about what do you love about 1199? Not a single person mentioned a picket line or a walk-in on the boss, even though they've done plenty of that and much, much more. Instead, they talked about 1199 as a family because of the friends who showed up when they gave birth to their first child, when that birth was a difficult birth, or when someone needed to hold their hand at a hospital bedside because they're receiving treatment for some medical setback. That's what they talked about. That's what 1199 meant to them. This union makes living lives that matter possible with enough stability and security for friends and family to gather. And that is worth fighting for. There are many brave acts of courage in the face of prejudice that will never make the headlines. And too often our political leaders disappoint us and, dare I say, disgust us with their complicity with overt acts of racism and prejudice. Tonight's forum is about how we engage our allies. All allies, newsflash, headline. If you have not heard this before, all allies are flawed. There are no perfect allies, and those who insist on perfection are probably not organizers. We have to confront injustice, but we don't have to destroy allies in our coalitions, and the allies themselves also should not be trying to destroy us. And we have to find ways to work through betrayals, hurts, and harms if there is a mutual willingness to do so. But I think many of us are tired of being told that we must accept and cater to racism as a price of being in a coalition. There are racists, transphobes, and xenophobes amongst us, so we must concede to them because we need their votes. Or there are others who say that we must pursue what some of us call purity politics. No one is admitted to our club unless they prove ahead of time that they aren't racist, sexist, etc. Both of these are false choices, and they feed on each other. That dichotomy feeds on each other. Standing for justice is not the same as call out and cancel culture. I've been teaching recently about SNCC and the civil rights movement, and last week we read a chapter on the shift in SNCC, right, from the kind of voter registration, desegregation, organizing work that they were doing, and the call for Black power. And in analyzing the shift to what is called dogmatism, the author noted that the more a person called for ideological purity and relied on charisma, the less organizing was actually occurring. Right? Think about that. That those who were insisting on the purest of approaches were not the ones who were doing the on-the-ground organizing. The right is out front and blatant about what they're doing, and it is painful when we encounter those who think it is safer and better to ignore it. There's a barrage of blatantly racist comments, but your silence makes you complicit. And I think the sordid history of Democrats conforming to racist framing on crime and welfare is especially painful. And that they do it because they think they can be electorally rewarded. And what happens is that they ignore the people, places, and examples who are rewarded for doing the opposite and standing up for something better and more meaningful. And while it's important for us to talk about multiracial democracy, I just want to point out that the right wing is developing a multiracial white supremacy coalition, right? There is no shortage of people of color and immigrants who are a part of MAGA. So I recommend that we stop equating skin color with justice and to address injustice and the perverse incentives that oppressed people are offered to endorse and support oppressive systems. Right? Malcolm X talked compellingly about the difference between the field Negro and the house Negro, so to speak. Those incentives are real. And we have to attend to the principles and value systems that people are articulating, not just in their skin color. There's a lot at stake. We know these inflection points matter. And we have a history of repudiating racism, but often 50 to 100 years after the fact, right? So we passed the 1924 National Origins Act that essentially says only folks from Europe can come to this country, and it takes us until 1965 to repeal it, right? We intern Japanese Americans in World War II, and it takes until 1980s to pay reparations, right? And I can go on and on. The horrendous crime bill, and 3 strikes, you're out, right? It takes 40 years to realize, oh, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. Horrible, horrible systemic racism. And yet here we are in this historical moment on the verge of repeating those dynamics, of putting in place another set of racist laws and approaches that the right wing knows that it'll take 50 years to 100 years to wake up from that hangover and that headache. We're criminalizing 100% of the Somali population for the actions of a few. But we don't criminalize white men after Timothy McVeigh did what he did, or what Dylan Roof did, right? Or the endless parade of serial killers and other crimes, right? They get a get out of jail free card all too often. And that dynamic has to be called out directly. This playbook is old, and we're tired of mainstream leaders who feel trapped by it. That playbook means appeal to racial fears. This is a document from 2010 laying out the 10 moves in the right-wing playbook. It is not new, right? Portray Latinos as racists, portray immigrants as invaders and criminals and disease carriers, define anti-immigrant as pro-worker, push a divisive black-brown wedge, and now they've updated the playbook for anti-Muslim extremism, right? It is time that it's more than time that we learn the lessons of how to push back and to push back effectively without destroying our communities. I want to point out that I'm not watching the time, so someone needs to tell me. Okay, all right, so I want to point out that we actually know how to organize successfully across race, class, gender, sexuality, right? We've done it time and time again. And we've done it in ways where people feel seen, heard, they lead, and we get good outcomes for all of us. And it's because we know how to do it that we get McCarthyism and we get the Red Scare, right? It's because of that that we get these attacks on wokeism. So I just want to remind ourselves of that history past and present. And I want to read a bit from the March in Washington, which many of you in this room may know. The full name is the March in Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Jobs and freedom, right? And that A. Philip Randolph, head of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, who was earlier quoted by Ben, was instrumental in making that march happen. So I want to read from their organizing document. This crisis, the American crisis, is born of the twin evils of racism and economic deprivation. They rob all people, Negro and white, of dignity, self-respect, and freedom. They impose a special burden on the Negro, who is denied the right to vote, economically exploited, refused access to public accommodations, subjected to inferior education, and relegated to substandard ghetto housing. Discrimination in education and apprenticeship training renders Negroes, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, and other minorities helpless in our mechanized industrial society. And I read that because I want to just point out, like, too often we're told a misleading version, right, of our own history. We're told that civil rights was just about rights on the books, and that it's like African Americans being an interest group and just getting their piece of the pie. But it was not that. It was a freedom struggle and a liberation struggle that had in mind everyone who was oppressed, a primacy in African Americans, yes, but they were looking to liberate the soul of this nation and save it from its stankness. Just put it that way. Not to put too fine a point on it. And that vision of building for all people, rooted in the experiences of specific communities, is a really, really important one. It means that following Black leadership, following the leadership of Black women like Nadine and Yvonne and Veronica, following the leadership of our LTQ brothers and sisters and nibblings and comrades and co-workers, everyone, can be done if it's rooted in a value system of justice. It's rooted in a value system of love and rooted in a value system of, like, we can actually do better. I was asked, so I'll end by, I was asked to say, well, what should labor do? What should unions do? And I said to Hae-Lin, it's a trap. So if you're not inside labor, if you're not inside a union, telling a union what it's supposed to do is a trap. Because it's hard, right? I've been right there next to you. And much of what I know about organizing, I've learned from many of the people sitting in this room. Look, fighting for racism is everyone's fight, right? I went to the No Kings March. There were a lot of white people. It's true. What surprised me is how many white people were holding up signs like, we're against racism, no to the Nazi, you know, all the things. I don't know where all the Black folks were. Some of us were there. Some of us might be at our second job or our first job or our family obligations. I don't know why people weren't there. Get out, get in and fit in wherever you fit in, wherever you can, whenever you can. We have to reject the notion that supporting immigrants and immigrant workers is an abandonment of white male workers, right up front. If the strategy requires you to punch down on people who are weaker than you, then it means the people with real power are not being held accountable, and you are doing their dirty work. We don't want good jobs and bad jobs. We want and need all jobs to be good jobs. Period. Full stop. It's about the job, and that's what the employers control, not the worker. However, we may be looking at a future where there aren't as many jobs, right? There was a headline a few weeks ago. Amazon is looking to reduce 500,000 jobs so the robots can do it. So guess what? I think that's an invitation to unions and for all of us to say this fight is bigger than a job. It's about how we organize society and who gets the benefits of the things that are created, right, in the society. So to work on economic issues means you're working on racial issues and vice versa, right? The separation is artificial. Immigrants aren't the problem, employers are. In Alabama, the state with the largest convict leasing program, there are work release programs where the incarcerated are allowed out every day so they can go to work at McDonald's. If it's not the immigrants, it's going to be if it's not the robots, it's going to be those who are incarcerated. Like they're going to find something out there to eat your lunch one way or another. And so they do, well, something like that, something like that. And the really good workers who are up for parole find out that their parole is denied because they need to keep them in the system working. Alabama is a state where 25% of the state budget goes to incarceration. All right? So 70% of workers, poll after poll shows, want a union. 70% of workers want a union. This is like, shooting fish in a barrel, as they say, from an organizing perspective. Why is that? I think it's because the boss is the strongest persuader. COVID made it crystal clear. They don't care about you. The push towards AI and driverless cars and trains makes that clear. The billionaires are building underground bunkers and exploring outer space to further proof they will save themselves and those like them. Belonging to a union should be one of the easiest things to do, as simple as going to church. My classes here tonight, my issues in organizing class, hey. And tonight we're studying organizing in the South. So I'm going to end on that note with lessons from organizing in the South. One of the readings for tonight mentioned that the United Steelworkers had a Southern organizing campaign with the slogan, "Wrong not to belong." There we go. That can be a message for all of us. It's not just a union fight, it's a worker fight. And so the theme of the day is organize, organize, organize. And I don't mean NLRB elections. I don't. Right? Organizing means speaking with all people, not just those who agree with you, and having a real conversation where you show up as a real person, not talking points on legs. All right, with that said, what it means from an institutional perspective is what are the ways that unions are building alliances? Alliances with tenant unions, with debtors unions, right? With other organized formations. They're there in your membership. How do you elevate that? How do you build those alliances? Not just a coalition for the next short-term budget thing, da-da-da-da-da. We got that on lock. How are you also setting aside some resources to build long-term, deep infrastructure and alliances to build an independent politic for workers that's bigger than any single election? Win, lose, or draw, okay? The time for silos and competition needs to be behind us. and we need to really move forward. In Tennessee, just last night, the GOP, they kept that House seat in the special election, but they're sweating. They're sweating. Last year, they won that district 22 percentage points. They lost 13 percentage points, right? They won by 9%. So, look, they've been doing some organizing in Tennessee. Don't sleep on Tennessee. That's where the sanitation workers took a stand. Their blood and the blood of Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee at a labor strike that watered the seeds of public sector unionism across this country. We've paid in blood. The Central Labor Council in Tennessee has been doing long, hard organizing for over 15 years. Most recently, they created Stand Up Nashville, and they negotiated with Nashville Soccer Holdings because Major League Soccer is coming to Tennessee. $15.50 is the wage floor for everybody. Everyone. That's the minimum. Affordable housing on site and a pipeline to construction careers for those with barriers to employment. It is possible, even in red states, because organizing is about talking to everyone and seeing what you can build together. It's still possible. So I deeply believe where the South goes, so goes the nation, that we have a lot to learn from our Southern comrades. And I leave you all with a quote from Bridget Flaherty, who's the co-founder of Down Home, North Carolina. How are we going to get anywhere if we're just afraid of conflict and we're afraid of real people? We want purity so badly. We want purity in people. We want purity in politics. We don't want there to be independence. We want there to be Dems and Republicans. We want people to be left and right. And that's just not how people live. We have to love them for that complexity and figure out how to organize inside of that. And we are up to the task. We've done it before, and we can do it again.
Give it up for Dr. Alethia Jones. Wow. All right. Thank you. That was amazing. We're now going to hear from our three panelists who will respond to Dr. Alethia's address, starting with Nadine Williamson, and then we'll hear from Chris Doles and Hae-Lin Choi. Go for it.
So they said they're giving me 7 minutes to respond. I mean, listen, while you were speaking, I was feeling things inside because, you know, I stand here or sit here as a Black woman, as an immigrant, from a family of immigrants. I've heard many stories of how my grandparents came to this country. When I was growing up, I lived in a bedroom with my parents, and my cousins were in the other bedroom with their parents. And I don't know how many immigrants are in the room, but that's how we lived until everyone got their papers. And not everyone came here legally. And so a time like now is hard. And I feel it in my soul. I think about how people feel who are on TPS and it's expiring, who have been here for 20 years and now are faced with having to go back to a country that they know no one. This is really what's happening. And, you know, 1199, I will tell you, in my opinion, and maybe I'm biased, but there's a lot of 1199ers in the room. I think that we are the blueprint of how a union, a labor union, should be. We take immigrant justice so seriously. We ensure that our leadership looks like the members that we serve. And so when we talk later on this evening about labor unions and how labor unions can do different and why labor unions are not, you know, in an anti-racism space, want it to be clear that I'm not talking about 1199. As you know, there are many unions, and when I think about the many unions, I think about the transit workers, the sanitation workers. My husband is a sanitation worker and is a part of a very, very strong union. They run the city. And they run the city, baby. And let me tell you, the leadership of that union does not look like the workers. And you will find that in many of the unions, in much of labor. One thing that my sister Alethia talked about was the marches, the many marches where we have our allies, white folks who came out in droves and supported the movement, and I thank you all. But Alethia said she didn't know why. Where were the people of color? She didn't know why they were out there. She said she was out there though. I was not out there. But what I heard, I will say, in a lot of spaces that I'm in, and many of you probably know that, a lot of people of color felt like, I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting the good fight. Let them fight it. Because I did what I had to do in this election, and I don't know who put him there. I'm being real with y'all. That is what I heard. That is what was happening in rooms that I was in conversations that I was in. It took to the second march for me to get there because I started to feel that way. But as Alethia said, we cannot expect that our allies are going to be perfect. We cannot expect that this movement is going to be perfect. And we cannot just lay down when we're not happy with the way things are going, right? For a while, I was so mad with some of my Hispanic brothers and sisters. I'm saying, what are you doing? He is going to target your people. He is going to target us. And let's not get into the Black folks who feel like we're not going to be the target. Let's not get into that. Because the way that ICE is going to come for us really hard, February 3rd, I am so nervous. And I just want to share a personal story just because this is something that I didn't think I would go through. I have been in this country for 40 years. And honestly, was able to obtain citizenship through my mom, automatic citizenship. Trump repealed a law, which means it is no longer valid from 19 whatever. And when I went to renew my passport, what do you think happened? I was flagged and couldn't get a passport. And so want to share with you all that me, who I feel I'm an upstanding citizen, no, I got a good job and I'm a good person. when I told my mom and we had to go to the immigration building, my mom and my husband said, let's sit outside for an hour to make sure that ICE is not there before you go in. I have been here for 40 years, right? And I was, I'm a fighter, so I was ready for whatever. But I had also gone to see immigration lawyers before I went to the immigration building. And what do you think they told me, who have been here for 40 years? They told me, you are high risk, you should not go to the appointment. And I spoke to 2 lawyers. And many of you don't know that this is what I was dealing with. And when I tell you I was fearful, and I know I have a right to be here. So I'm just thinking, imagine those folks who TPS is expiring or has expiring. And let me tell you, there are many people who you know that probably are in TPS status. What you will see on social media is, well, why didn't they they had all this time to become citizens. They had all this time to have permanent residency. What I want you all to know is that there is absolutely no pathway to legal residency when you have TPS status. There is absolutely no pathway to citizenship when you have TPS status. There may be a smidgen if you are granted asylum. But other than that, most people have missed that window and are no longer eligible for asylum. So those are things that we should know. Those are things that we should share in communities that don't know that. It is extremely important. And so I just want to address one other thing that Alethia shared about labor unions. New York City, New York State is really a labor town. We're a union town. But yet, if there is a building that is to be erected, usually it will be a union, right? Who is building that building. Do you think that that union will say, the people who work in this building must be union? Do you think that happens? No. Imagine a world where when the labor union gets that bid for that site, that they say, whoever works on this building must be union, whoever works in this building must be union. Imagine that. And to me, that is what coalition looks like. We can't even get that together in a union town, in New York. We can't even get that together. So that kind of work, in my opinion, is transformational work, not transactional work. We spend most of our time filing grievances, fighting for better wages, and that's wonderful. But it's the transformation that if we have unions working together in coalition, that this is going to be a union town, and I'm only going to be here only if there are union people that are going to erect this building, that are going to clear the path for this building, that are going to clean this building, that are going to work in this building. That is the transformational work that we truly, truly need.
It's a real honor to be a part of this panel. I want to say thanks to Nadine for hosting. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for your brilliant remarks. Thank you to Hae-Lin for being a new friend that I've met in the struggle, who brought us together, and to be in the fight with you. And your leadership in the labor movement has been so critical to so many of us. I think folks recognize all the leadership up here, and it's a real honor to be alongside you all. So I'm here representing the Federal Unionist Network, which as the name suggests, represents the federal workforce that I think I'm very proud to say this year really showed up to fight back as the attacks began to unfold against us. And if the question of the night is what is labor's response to MAGA, and maybe for me it's a little bit more specific on what is federal labor's answer to MAGA and this administration, I think I just want to share, something that we often talk about in the federal labor movement is that we wish for the federal labor movement. We don't wish for it. It just is the case that the federal sector is inevitably a model. The federal government is inevitably a model employer. Sometimes it's a good model. That's what we want. But oftentimes it's a bad model. And the precursor I just want to reference quickly for folks who have been in the labor movement for some time, you may be familiar with the 1981 air traffic controllers strike that set the tone for the subsequent decades and the decline of organized labor in the decades since that, the defeat of that strike. For us in the federal sector, it's a federal sector strike. It was an illegal federal sector air traffic controllers strike in 1981. And Ronald Reagan, by smashing that strike and by smashing that union, sent a signal to all of capital that it was open season on labor. And that's what we've seen in the decades since. I say that to say, at the beginning of this year, it's not a mistake that the first days of this administration were focused on DEI policies. In name was focused on rolling back the 4 years of whatever executive orders the Biden administration has put into place. But the truth is they were looking to roll back many decades of progress going to take our country back to before the civil rights gains. And I would even say, depending on how you look at it, maybe even back to gains going back 140 years. And in the 10, 11 months since then, folks may be familiar with the fact that the federal workforce has contracted, and we could talk about, I won't go into the details, but 300-some thousand federal workers have lost their job, have left federal service. Of that, there's a disproportionate presence of Black workers and Black women in particular. Because of the green light that the attack on DEI did in the federal government, it was a green light to every racist boss got the green light to go open season on their Black workforce. And 319,000 Black women have left the workforce in this country. And a subset of that, of course, is the federal sector, but much of that is the private sector. So the cascading effects of the racist attacks by this administration on the federal workforce not only affects the Black workforce directly, but also indirectly through the signal and the free hand that this administration has given every racist boss in this country. So in the federal sector, how have we approached the attacks? I want to tell two quick stories. I know I don't have much time. One is the story of Paul Asadebe and Palmer Heenan, who work still collect paychecks for now, at the Housing and Urban Development headquarters in DC. And the other is the story of Ellen May, who works at the Boston Regional Office of Food and Nutrition Services. And these are all comrades, people I'm very proud to call comrades in the fight, who made the courageous decision to, in the case of Paul and Palmer at HUD, to officially, very legally and carefully blow the whistle on this administration's very intentional attack and reversal of an underfunding of the Civil Rights Act, in particular as relates to housing discrimination. They blew the whistle. There's been good coverage of it. If you don't know their names, again, it's Paul Asadebe and Palmer Heenan. They are two of the 4 whistleblowers, and they have received notice to be terminated rather promptly thereafter, because this administration obviously will stop at nothing to retaliate, illegal as it may be, against whistleblowers. And they're, I think, the best of what the federal workforce has to offer to uphold the oath we took to the American public to say that we will, uphold the Constitution, uphold the laws, and perform our service to the American people. And they see their resistance, they see their whistleblowing as an extension of that oath. And they've taken obviously great risks. They're facing termination. We're obviously fighting it, and we hope to stop that. But even if they don't, they went in eyes wide open and said it is more important that the truth be heard than that I know I have a job. And that kind of bravery, courage, and sacrifice, I think it represents the best of the federal workforce. And Ellen May, who works at the Food and Nutrition Services, where they provide, she works on the programs to provide SNAP and WIC benefits to the neediest in New England, which her office serves. She, on day 2 of the government shutdown, she just practiced her free speech rights and talked to journalists. She was on MSNBC on October 2nd, and she predicted what 3 weeks later all of us, everybody was talking about, which is the SNAP cliff and the drop in benefits that was going to happen on November 1st. And she just said, this is likely what's to happen. This is, you know, a horrifying potential impact of this shutdown. And for just sharing something that was otherwise already public information, you know, she properly disclaimed herself. The next day, she received her notice of termination. And they are the names we know, and there are many other federal workers who are standing up. And I think that kind of, there's a lot important about these, the tactics of federal workers who in their unions, with their unions, these are people who did it because they had the confidence of their unions. These are union leaders. Ellen's the president of her chapter. Paul is a steward. These are folks who, one, are taking public courageous stands that are inspirational, and I think important on those grounds alone. They reflect and feed into the internal organizing that their unions, that gave them the confidence to take the stand in the first place, and in turn are giving confidence to others to do more internal organizing in their unions and build stronger bases. Not necessarily always the most public stuff that we see in the news, but the hard day-to-day work of building stronger unions. It builds bridges to the community groups, whether it's the civil rights community that had Paul and Palmer's back when they came out with their whistleblowing, or the food security organizations in Massachusetts that flanked Ellen May at her press conference when she spoke, when she came out with her intention to fight the illegal retaliation publicly. So the kind of common good unionism and the bridges and the connections to the broader social movements that unions must link up with if we are to win. And of course, it also exposes the hypocrisy of an administration that purports to stand up for free speech. You know, it's all a lie. It's always been a lie. And when they illegally retaliate against people like Paul and Palmer and Ellen, we know it just shows the depth of those lies. But speaking truth to power is not enough. There must also be direct action and solidarity, because our using our voices is not enough. We actually have to find real leverages. And here I want to just reference the incredible work of federal workers who, upon recognizing the way in which our places of work, you know, I worked for 8 years at 26 Federal Plaza, an address that I'm not used to everybody knowing, but now you do. We early this year, before we were even doing, very early on, when we identified the reality of the inhumanity, the humanitarian crisis that was happening, you know, on our like on the 10th floor of the federal building, like we were literally sharing elevator rides with ICE agents on the way to terrorize families and separate families. And the federal workers who have been organizing against ICE and using not just our eyewitness presence in these federal buildings, but also joining in the streets and organizing informational pickets with the not as an add-on issue, but explicit, you know, focused informational pickets to say ICE should not be here. We want to make our workplace a place that's safe for the public, and that kind of meaningful solidarity. I think it was probably kind of shocking for people to hear federal workers against ICE. Aren't ICE federal workers? Yeah, but they're not the ones that we want to call brothers and sisters. And I think that this is important because it defends the most vulnerable. And that's not just true about the vulnerabilities that, you know, the undocumented face domestically, but it also has an effect internationally when there's no prospects for asylum in the biggest economy in the world, and that frees the hand of the worst bosses and dictators all over the world who are seeking asylum here from that. So it has a cascading effect internationally. So when we defend the most vulnerable here, when we're talking about the undocumented, we're also holding up some standards internationally. I think it's a model, again, for solidarity unionism, which is something that all of organized labor, I think, could do a lot more to conduct. And it exposes the brutality and inhumanity of this so-called America First agenda of this administration, with civil servants serving as the conscience of our government. So finally, I think it's worth saying that we are today paying a price. The American working class, I think, is paying a price for our movement's failure to organize workers. It is not a coincidence that on the eve of Trump, and I mean like 2015, 2016, on the eve of Trump, we were experiencing record inequality alongside record low union density, and it's only gotten worse since. And that is a product not only, and it corresponds not only with our under-organizing of our class, but also our under-solidarizing with the most vulnerable within it and outside of this country. And so I think if we are to make up any ground, it is to start by repairing the mistakes of our past, and we have a ton of solidarity to offer, and let's see our self-organization as directly linked to the solidarity we show with the rest of the entire working class and the international working class.
Whew. All right. Good evening, everyone. It's always fun to go last. What can I say? This is a little intimidating. So, again, my name is Hae-Lin Choi. I am the political director at the Communications Workers. Thank you to my wonderful panelists. Thank you to 1199 for hosting us. And thank you, Alethia, for bringing history here. I was just thinking about how in the labor movement, how little we talk about our history. And when we in CWA started to do educational models about our history, and when we had a room of unionists asking them, how many here know how we got the 8-hour workday? Not a lot of people know. If you ask them, anybody heard of the Flint sit-down strike? I think when we have people of color in the room and we say, anybody know about the Memphis sanitation worker strike? Those hands go up. And then when we say, guys, this is our history. This is something that we should be proud of, but also it teaches us something. And the fact that we as unionists do not know our history is a problem. And we learn so much from that. So thank you for bringing that in. Nadine, thank you for bringing in your personal story. And I have to say, I'm also an immigrant. I'm from Germany originally. My parents came to Germany as guest workers from South Korea. And I became a citizen 2 weeks ago. Thank you. I was thinking a lot about what you've said about 26 Federal Plaza, you said about your journey, and all of a sudden the fear, and I was on the lucky line, right? When you are at 26 Federal Plaza, there's a lucky line for USCIS where you do your naturalization, and then there's the unlucky line of immigration. And the fact that you have to go there and see, and I feel like I'm going to start crying, not everybody on that line is going to go home that day. Every day. And I think it's important that we remember what's happening right now is not normal. We can never normalize this. And we have to use, and people are scared, especially we in the labor movement, let's be honest, we're a little scared to say this is authoritarianism, this is fascism. Those are big words, right? We don't really say it in the labor movement, but history teaches us and movements around the world teach us that when people actually understand this is fascism, they're more willing to take action. And I get it. We live in New York City. You can wake up, go to work, live about your day, and feel like, what are all these hysterical people talking about? This is like, they're saying fascism. You know, I don't see any like Nazi guards on the street. I don't see any checkpoints. I don't see people being put on trains descending to the gulags, even though we know all this is happening, right? We have military on the streets right now in American cities. We have people being sent to gulags and people don't even know where they are. You've heard about this child in Queens where the parents don't even know where they are. Like, it's happening right now, but you can go about your day in the city today and not feeling like anything has changed. But it's important that we do not normalize this and that we talk about it. And I gotta say, we have a lot of work to do in labor, right? And Nadine, I'm glad that you mentioned that 1199 is built different, and it is true. And speaking from CWA, I will say, you know, let's be real amongst friends. We have a lot of work to do. Like I'm in one of those unions. I'm the first woman of color in leadership in CWA, and we represent all kinds of communities in CWA, but we're sort of on the list of unions, and you are so right that leadership very often doesn't reflect membership, right? And that's a problem, and there's a lot more work to do. And I know that 1199 is built differently because 2 weeks ago, when I was in this building, we did a training with over 500 New Yorkers who came to a Hands of New York training to learn how to protect their neighbors, how to build community with their neighbors. And it was so encouraging to see not only that 1199 was like, yeah, no question. 1199 is one of the leading organizations of Hands of New York, so clearly understanding that these fights are connected. And I told you I'm from Germany. I have roots in South Korea. And I'm thinking a lot about Germany these days. And you have all probably seen these Facebook images that say, oh, if you ever wondered what you've done during the Holocaust, you're doing it right now. If you ever wonder what you've done during the civil rights, you're doing it right now, right? What are we waiting for? We're already 9 red lines past what in any normal circumstance we would have called a red line. And I also think a lot about this thing, and honestly, growing up in Germany, this poem felt a little hokey to say, oh, first they came for the communists, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist. And they came for the trade unionists, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't a trade unionist. Notice trade unionist was second, right after communist, right? And then when they came for me, it felt a little hokey in Germany. It felt a little bit like one of those eat, pray, love Facebook images. But now I feel like it is so important because we have not learned all that much. They're coming for the undocumented immigrants, and a lot of us think, oh, that's them. They're not going to come for us, right? I mean, federal workers, I think, and we connected on the fact that where's the labor movement standing up for the federal workers? And I think a lot of us who don't represent federal workers have not this feeling of like they're coming, one injury to one is an injury to all. We haven't seen tables being flipped, people walking out